One thing we're going to be demanding is we're going to be demanding respect from other nations. Canada, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. We're not going to have that anymore. We can't do it. I don't know if it's good for them. As you probably know, I say you can always become a state. And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years. And it's not fair that we should have a $200 billion or $250 billion deficit. We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody.
Donald Trump there addressing the World Economic Forum virtually, telling the global audience that Canada can avoid tariffs by becoming a state. Also putting this country further on notice, saying he wants the military spending target for NATO members boosted from 2% of GDP, an amount Canada has yet to meet, up to 5%.
I'm also going to ask all NATO nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, which is what it should have been years ago. It was only at 2%, and most nations didn't pay until I came along. I insisted that they pay, and they did, because the United States was really paying the difference at that time, and it was unfair to the United States.
And here's the response from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
A number of years, we brought Canada's defense spending up from below 1%, where it was under the previous Conservative government, to a path towards full 2% in the coming years. We have close to tripled projected defense spending since 2015, and we're going to continue to work with our NATO partners to make sure that we're doing everything necessary to keep Canada safe. The next NATO meeting is in Netherlands in The Hague, but Canada has a strong track to invest in protecting the North, protecting Canadians.
Let's break it all down, this back and forth, at least with our front bench. Former Alberta Cabinet Minister Gary Mar is here. He's the CEO of the Canada West Foundation. Former Manitoba Premier and Canadian Ambassador to the United States, Gary Dewar, is with us. He's a senior business advisor at Dentons. And Stephanie Levitz is a senior reporter with the Globe and Mail's Parliament Hill Bureau. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you tonight. Gary Dewar, I'm going to start with you because, it's difficult in a way to cover this because every day there's a new comment. That certainly adds fuel to the fire. But I wonder what you think about how difficult it is to discern what is actually coming. And how do you, as governments on this side of the border, sort of navigate or figure out how to navigate it when we don't seem to know anything for certain?
Well, what we do know for sure is Donald Trump ran on immigration and he ran on inflation. And even some of the people who were part of that Davos collection today know that if you have tariffs, you have higher inflation. We also know he wants to figure out a way to not have his tax cuts of 2017 expire at the end of 2025 and then go up in the election year in 2026, not for him, but for the House and the Senate. And so he's trying to pay that down with the tariffs, but certainly his messaging to the world, including the Saudis, you'll produce more oil and you'll have lower prices. That's not going to happen. And I don't know how many OPEC meetings he's watched with people driving away in their limousines after a meeting when they've shafted the United States, unlike Canada, in terms of being a reliable energy partner to the United States. We just got to keep ourselves aware of our great partnership with the United States. So the American public, always deal with the American public. I think the premiers should be dealing with the American governors. They run the economies. Trump has decided to go over the Senate and over the House with these executive orders that go back right back to the 30s in terms of the authority he has as president. He's now using that currently. But we have other friends that I say run the economies, the governors, and that will be very, very concerned about higher inflation in their own states, less jobs in their own states, and less trade with a customer like Canada. And we have people we can talk to, and we've got to go around the speech of the day from the president and get on with our own message in Washington and throughout the United States.
Gary, I know you were in Washington, Gary Mar, I should say, a few days ago for the inauguration. ultimately, I mean, much of our success in the first go around was because of leveraging all of those other sort of partnerships, right? Be it with governors or business, and ultimately them, pleading our case to a certain degree. Are you confident? And I should say the premiers are headed to Washington in a few weeks, and then again they're going to go to the governor's meeting. But are you confident, based on what you're seeing play out, and the difference is in Trump 2.0 versus 1.0, in the ability of us to convince those people to speak up, or maybe I should put it, of them to speak up on our behalf?
I think it's really important that we get them engaged, because ultimately no Canadian, except for those with dual citizenship, vote for the president of the United States. But there are so many points of connectivity between Canada and the United States that we need to lever on. We need to, as Gary Dewar says, the governors, but this relationship is about much, much more than just the Prime Minister and the President of the United States. It's about governors and premiers. It's about businesses that operate on both sides of the border. I listened carefully to what President Trump said to the Davos audience, and a lot of it is it's just not true. He doesn't have a $250 billion trade deficit with Canada. It's about $60 billion. And if you take energy out of the picture, it's actually a fairly healthy trade surplus. And so if you look at his reasonings for the tariffs, it's to bring manufacturing and jobs to the United States. Energy is one of the ways that we do that. We export jobs through a pipeline, and J.D. Vance knows that because there's a refinery in Lima, Ohio. That oil comes from Alberta, and it creates jobs, and they turn that oil into finished product and sell gasoline. If you look at, for example, potash, 90% of the potash used in the United States is imported, and almost all of it comes from the province of Saskatchewan. You look at how the president said we don't need their wood products. Well, if you ask the people in North Carolina that are doing the analysis on this, the answer is, well, in the short term, we can get some from Germany and Sweden, but in the long term, we don't have the same kind of supply that they have in Canada, and we're going to be needing that. So from a Canadian point of view, we need to have short-term tactics to deal with this, but we also need to have a long-term strategy as to how we look at other options for big trade partners. If there's one thing better than having one really good customer, it's having two or more really good customers for what it is that you sell or produce from Canada.
And you'd think we would have, Steph, had that conversation, a few more times in the interim since the last Trump administration, but I digress. On the issue of whether or not we can trust those who understand the logic of what both Garys just pointed out to make our case, I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because it's not like Trump hasn't been presented with the facts already.
There's an obvious tension there between some kind of political messaging that Donald Trump appears to be after with his attacks on Canada that is not grounded in fact. It's not necessarily about the facts, is it, of our trade deficit, which, as Gary points out, doesn't really exist. It's not about the fentanyl coming over our border into the United States, which doesn't really exist. What is this actually about? And that's a question I think our political leadership is really struggling to answer. Is this about Canada being an easy sort of somebody to kick around just because we're next door and the world loves Canada? So it's, no big deal. No one's going to pay attention. No one's sticking up for us. Because one of the things that's interesting to notice, no one is sticking up for us. We need to stick up for ourselves. And at a time when our national political leadership is quite weak on that front with the Prime Minister, you could tell the Prime Minister today was so frustrated. You could feel the frustration. Well, if Trump's going to, maybe he'll put the tariffs on Valentine's Day or maybe April Fool's Day, It's frustrating for the government because it makes them look weak. And the Liberals are already in a position of weakness. So, it's, he's getting under Justin Trudeau's skin in a way by doing all of this. And perhaps that's all that is.
I guess, Gary Dewar, Steph brings me to kind of where we started, which is, how hard is it to figure out what to do when even the Prime Minister is like, I don't know when he's going to do this. Is it April 1st, February 1st, Valentine's Day? Like, we have no clarity on anything. How hard is that?
Well, he's been like that, when he was first elected in 2017. And then, of course, we knew then, and we still know now, that he needs a bumper sticker. He always needs a win. I talked to people that had worked with him in New York, and I asked them, what kind of a developer is he? And they say, well, he's not a developer, he's a marketer. And I think we have to always remember he's first, second, and third a marketer. And obviously his election in November 5th has proven he's good at it. We have to continue to make the point when he talks about, if you don't build it in the United States, you'll get a tariff. A lot of our companies have all kinds of operations in the United States that create thousands and thousands of jobs in the United States. So in terms of our relationship, there's obviously American companies that have operations that create employment in Canada, but there's a lot of other ones. And we actually have at the embassy, and we take to the Hill all the jobs in every district, all the jobs in every state. And sometimes it surprises senators, sometimes it surprises congressional representatives, because they thought it was just jobs in the United States, and they didn't know they were created in Canada and created jobs in their community. And we're going to have to spend a lot of shoe leather getting around the White House to get that message out before people are affected with layoffs in either Canada or the United States.